This is absolutely embarrassing. The Phoenix Suns just got swept by the Minnesota Timberwolves in a series that I thought was going to be very, very competitive. And there is a lot of question marks going with this team into the offseason, as now that's what we're preparing for over here on Suns Digest. Welcome over here. I'm Bruce Veliz with my co-host C.J. Pierre, and we're going to be breaking down this terrible loss in this sweep at home and going over what are going to be some of the repercussions for this Suns team. But before we dive in and break down all this news, we'd like to let you know that around 96% of our viewers are not subscribed. So if you guys would be awesome and hit that subscribe button, this is the place for Suns news. We are a new channel here. We're going to be putting out daily Suns content. So make sure to hit that subscribe button, as this is the place for you. But CJ, as we get into this game, what are your kind of thoughts going on with this team? Obviously, they go into this game, they need this win to not get swept. And unfortunately, we see the worst outcome, as we're the first team to get swept and possibly could be the only team to get swept in the first round.
Yeah, man, it's just disappointing, to say the least. It's a disappointing end to what was a disappointing season. Granted, it's nice to see that they showed some fight. This was the most entertaining game of the four in the series and the closest that the Suns came to winning. And you thought that they really had all the elements, all the ingredients to come away with a win. Devin Booker went off. He had 49 points. Kevin Durant had 33 points. But really, when you look the rest of the box score, those are the only two guys that scored in double figures. And that's not really what you want in a full team game. Then you look at the bench. They only got 10 points off the bench, 4 from Josh Okogie, 6 from Eric Gordon. That's just not going to get it done when you're playing the best defensive team in the league. And, you got to look at, hey, this is supposed to be a big three. Hey, Bradley Beal, where you at, man? You only got 9 points. You foul out of the game. Anthony Edwards is cooking you on the other side of the court. And, you just no-showed in the most important game of the season. And I really think that, when he fouled out, and you heard the Suns fans booing, and they kind of knew that the writing was on the wall at that point. And, the Minnesota Timberwolves just kind of just imposed their will. Anthony Edwards took over in the fourth quarter, dunking on KD, near the end of the game. And, it was just a wrap at that point. So as a Suns fan, you're heartbroken, because you really thought that when you brought Bradley Beal in and you moved DeAndre Ayton, you thought you were going to get some team chemistry. All the injuries that happened over the course of the season, and then you find a way to skirt the play in. You beat the team that you're playing 3 times the regular season. I thought this was the perfect matchup for the Suns. I really thought that they were going to be able to execute, and it just turns out that there are a lot of things going on. They were not connected. The Grayson Allen injury was brutal. It was even more brutal when you just look at the distribution of scoring, the 3-point shooting in this game. And it was just it's a rough one to take. We took one on the chin tonight.
You're definitely right, CJ. Like you said, you brought up some great valid points. Obviously, the Suns in the couple first games, very, very lackluster on the offensive side. But tonight we saw KD and Devin Booker come out and shine for this squad. You mentioned Kevin Durant, 33 points, 12 for 17 from the field, 7 for 9 from the free throw with 9 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 blocks. And Devin Booker getting his career high in the playoffs. 49 career points. Yes, he did have 21 free throws, and 20 of them were from the stripe, but 13 for 21 from the field, 3 from 5 from three-point range, with 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 1 block. He was a guy that I've been mentioning in the last couple of videos that had not been the greatest on the offensive side in this series, and he had to step up huge in this game. But even with him stepping up, like you mentioned, the bench guys did not come out and perform. We saw Okogie, 4 points, Gordon, 6 points, Gordon, 2 for 7 from the field, Nurkic, 3 for 5, and Royce O'Neal, 2 for 7 from the field, 2 for 6 from three-point range. You got to have bigger games out of those guys. And Bradley Beal, like you mentioned, that third star, he was supposed to be the guy that was supposed to come in. The rumors, everybody was hyping up that the Suns were going to be the team to take the division. Everybody was banking on them to have this dominant season. And unfortunately, just the expectations did not come through. So when you're looking at this team, obviously you mentioned the Grayson Allen injury, they have him locked up long term, all this types of things. What are your kind of motives for the Phoenix Suns this offseason and kind of going into the next year?
Well, I think when you're the Phoenix Suns, you really got to look at, what happened, what went wrong, what were the reasons, that we ended up getting swept, the only team that got swept. Obviously the Pelicans, they have a chance to get swept, by the Oklahoma City Thunder,
Yeah.
but no one wants to be the first team that, the inside guys on TNT are doing the going fishing memes of, and that's what's happening to this team. So we got to figure out why. Personally, I think it starts, at the top. Matt Ishbia, James Jones, the owner and the GM. They're the ones who wanted to make a big move and bring in Bradley Beal. They're the ones who decided to move on from DeAndre Ayton. And really, when you look at the team that was left, you had a team that did not have a true point guard. And I really feel like that's what bogged down the offense. It would have been great, for the Phoenix Suns to have, I don't know, maybe Mike Conley on their team to really settle things down. Even though if you look at the stats, Mike Conley didn't have a great game, but you never felt the Timberwolves feel like they were out of control, like never felt like there was always someone that was going to be there to settle things down whenever the Suns made a run or whenever they got out to their biggest lead, which was 6 points. Mike Conley got the ball, slowed it down, ran a little pick and roll with Rudy, ran a little pick and roll with Towns, and they got into something that worked for them. And the Suns just don't have that. Devin Booker is a natural scorer. He's not a point guard. He can try to be a facilitator. He can try to set his teammates up. But at the end of the day, that's just not where he's at his best. That's not where Kevin Durant or Bradley Beal are at their best. This team needed a point guard, a true point guard of some sort. Now, finding that point guard, that's going to be a challenge. It's going to be really difficult for them to do, given that they're a second apron team way above the luxury tax. They're one of the top five in terms of highest salary cap, and it's all tied up within 11 players that are on the team. So it's really going to be hard for them to make additions. And it's really going to be on general manager James Jones to figure out exactly how they're going to do that. And I really think they need to start with finding a true point guard.
I totally agree. Like you mentioned, CJ, the roster construction here in the offseason kind of left me confused, like bamboozled. I didn't really understand the Bradley Beal acquisition. Maybe if you were going to run Devin Booker and Bradley Beal at the 2 and 3, but you needed that point guard to run the offense. And we saw that with this series multiple times. Even tonight, the team just having some bad passes, some bad turnovers. And that's been one of the main issues with this series. That and the rebounding. But obviously the Timberwolves have like one of the best big man depth, so we can dive into that a little bit. But the point guard is the main issue, the main solution that they need to go after. And like you mentioned, being a second apron team limits them so much. One, to start off, they don't have that draft capital. They don't have a first round pick to 2031. Second off, being that second apron, you have to trade one contract for another contract. You can't trade one contract for multiple contracts. So if they even want to look to move off of a guy like Bradley Beal, possibly, even if anybody wanted him, or even a guy like Kevin Durant, or possibly Devin Booker, which I definitely disagree on, you're going to have to possibly add some draft capital to that for a guy like Bradley Beal. And you're not going to be able to do that with this squad because you don't have it. Obviously, there could be some guys like Booker and KD that could be moved, but those are the guys that stood out tonight. Those are your key two players. So realistically, I don't think those are the two guys that should be moved. Now, I think Tyus Jones would be a nice point guard that the Suns could go after. I don't know if you think about him. I think he could set up the offense really well. He's a pretty good defensive point guard as well. His assist to turnover ratio is one of the best in the NBA. So what do you kind of think on that? Do you think he would be a good acquisition? I know that the Wizards they're kind of weird with their kind of salary cap. Do you think that would be a possibility that we could go after him?
I think Tyus Jones would have been a perfect fit for this team. The problem is the opportunity to try and go and get him was at the trade deadline, but instead they brought in Royce O'Neal. Now, I like Royce O'Neal. I think he's a great defensive player and a decent shooter, but this was the time to get him now as far as, his availability in free agency. I have to take a look and see what Tyus Jones' contract is looking like. But in terms of trying to make a trade, you're trying to do a 1-for-1 trade with some draft capital. I don't really know if you're thinking that you're gonna trade Eric Gordon for Tyus Jones and some draft capital. I don't think that that's something that's going to happen. You really need to look at if the Suns are going to make a trade at their assets, and their best two assets are Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Bradley Beal might be an asset, but he has a no trade clause. So if he doesn't approve the trade, or if he doesn't, if you're trying to ship him, to the Spurs because you're trying to get Devin Vassell or something, it's not going to work out because he's not going to want to go to a team that's rebuilding. So yeah, again, I like Tyus Jones. I think he would be a perfect fit for the Suns. He's a decent shooter, and he's a true point guard. And he showed that, when he learned, under Coach K at Duke. But I don't see if he's a viable option. I think the Suns would be better off maybe looking in the direction of maybe a TJ McConnell, maybe an Emmanuel quickly if he's available. Someone like that. Maybe if they're able to dump off someone and maybe get a second round pick, then maybe they can develop a point guard. Maybe there's someone in the G League that we're not thinking about. Is Mac McClung available? I think that's kind of the realm that the Suns are going to go into, but they're going to need to find someone with some experience, someone that knows how to run an offense. And I think, guys like a Tyus Jones, guys like a TJ McConnell are, in the neighborhood, the ballpark that they're going to want to look for in the offseason.
All right, so you're saying maybe a younger guy to kind of build through up the draft because they're in the second apron, or maybe a guy that's on like a little bit of an older veteran contract. Maybe a guy like T.J. McConnell, a guy who could kind of fit in and be a nice role player for them. I think those are great acquisitions. One last question before we head out here. I just have one last thing. Going into next season, we obviously know that this big three is here: Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal. In your honest opinion, do you think that one of them will be gone and there will be a big two? Or do you think that the big three core will be here next season?
In my honest opinion, I think all three will be back. I don't really think that you got the best out of this team based on the way the roster was constructed. I think that if you make some tweaks, make some changes, find a true point guard, add some depth in the front court, find another big guy, another guy who can clog the paint, get some rebounds, and so that you're not forced to play small, especially against when you're playing a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Denver Nuggets who have so much size, the Los Angeles Lakers, even though, they have size, with AD and LeBron. And I feel like your only opportunity is to really like beef up your depth and find a true point guard. And that would allow Beal, Booker, and KD to really thrive, in the roles that they're supposed to be in. And so I think the Suns know that. I think the Suns recognize that, this necessarily wasn't their best shot. And I think that, if they make some tweaks with the roster, and I think that they'll have an opportunity. I think the biggest question mark beyond the big three is whether or not head coach Frank Vogel will stick around. This is his first year with the team. And there were a lot of rumors swirling that he could be on the hot seat, especially after getting swept. You never want to get swept.
Mm-hmm.
And, fans don't necessarily have a lot of patience. But I would really like to see Frank Vogel return. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a solid coach. I just don't think he had the right roster to pair with this big three. I think if the Suns are able to make some tweaks in the offseason, try and redo the books, look at their assets, maybe have to say goodbye to some guys, maybe like a Drew Eubanks who didn't even see the floor tonight. That's the kind of thing that'll happen. So I believe the big three will be back. I think they'll at least try and give it another go at the beginning of the season, see how it goes, and if they have to pivot, around the trade deadline next season, I think that's when we may see someone moved. It would probably most likely be Durant if it came to that. I don't see them moving off of Booker, and Beal has that no trade clause.
I'm glad we're on the same page, CJ. I think that they're going to bring back this big three, like you mentioned. I think the front office kind of screwed them. I think they have to retool this roster. Get that point guard like TJ McConnell. Maybe find some wing depth to help out, like you were talking about, some front court depth. Maybe a guy like Andre Drummond, a nice little rebounding veteran, could be a nice addition as well.
Yeah, that's
I think he'd be a nice addition. So maybe some of those tweaks around the rotation, and this team could be back and be hunting for another deep playoff run. You also mentioned Frank Vogel. I'm on your side with that as well. I think that he didn't get the best roster. Let's see how he can do with this new roster. Like you mentioned, he's on the hot seat after possibly getting swept. We broke down a video from Adrian Wojnarowski with reports. Then we saw him saying that Matisheba says his guaranteed job is secured. So we'll have a bunch of news breaking that down, either from myself, from CJ, together. We'll have it all here on Suns Digest. Like we mentioned, unfortunately, the Suns did get swept, the first team to go out, losing 122 to 116 on their home court. But we'll have all the news, all the drama breaking down the Phoenix Suns here on Suns Digest. So make sure to hit that subscribe button, make sure to hit that like button, and we'll catch you in future videos. From me, from my co-host CJ, we'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a great one, everyone, everybody. Peace out.